Tonight's topic is inner freedom. People talk about one second, I have to calibrate my. Let's see where I'm up to. That's not bad. People distinguish between, thank you very much, between, in terms of freedom, in terms of things external to the person, which hold him back, which take away his ability to do certain things he would like to do. And then sometimes people talk about inner freedom, not being able to do what they want to do because of certain motivations that they can't control. And I want to talk about that kind of internal problem. And in my introduction, I'm following a very good, influential philosopher named Harry Frankfurt. I'm not following him 100%, but the inspiration and the basic idea is his. Some of the applications are mine. Let's start by taking seriously something that people often say. Let's take a person who's at present addicted to smoking. He may say, I really don't want to smoke. I just can't help it. People talk like that. Now, not everything people say is reasonable or meaningful. People say all sorts of ridiculous things. But let's start by trying to take this one seriously. I really don't want to smoke. I just can't help it. Well, let's see. Is it true that he really doesn't want to smoke? If he really didn't want to smoke, then he wouldn't smoke, would he? I mean, isn't it because he wants to smoke and his desire to smoke is very strong that he's smoking? Isn't that why he has a problem? What could he mean by saying, I really don't want to smoke? So the first move is to say, well, sure, he wants to smoke. I mean, that's why he's smoking, and that's why he's in trouble. But he also wants not to smoke because he doesn't like it. He's against it. Okay, so now my picture of him is this. He has a desire to smoke, and he has a desire not to smoke. And of course that means he's suffering an inner conflict. That's quite true. But aren't both desires real? He has a real desire to smoke. That's why he's smoking. And he has a real desire not to smoke. And he's suffering conflict and life is difficult. Still, we don't understand what he could mean by saying, I really don't want to smoke. Now here's where Frankfurt makes his first brilliant move. Let's think about the kinds of things that we desire. Well, we desire to have certain things. We desire to do certain things. Sometimes we desire to be certain things. One of the things that we might have desires about is desires about our own psychology. Let's say a person has a bad temper. And he says, I wish I didn't lose my temper so often. Here his desire isn't about having something. In this case, it's not doing something. I wish I didn't get angry like I do. We had a fellow here at Yeshiva 42 years ago. Came in as a beginner. He just finished his college degree. And he saw the guys learning in the Beis Medrash 10, 12 hours a day. And he said to me, Rabbi, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But I wish I did want to do it because they're getting something that I'm not getting. What's driving them is a desire to do this thing. And I'd like to get what they're getting. I wish I had that motivation. I wish I did want it. So that wish is a wish about his own psychology. It's a wish about his own motivations. It's a wish about his own desires. Frankfurt calls those meta-desires. Meta means one level up. Often the level above is looking at the level below. The level below is desires for having things, for doing things, for being things, being the CEO. One level up is a desire about what desires you have and what desires you don't have. So now let's take a look at this guy who's suffering from smoking addiction. Let's take a look at where he is on the second level. If you ask him, how do you feel about your personality? How do you feel about your motivations? How do you feel about your desires? And this guy already has a desire to smoke and a desire not to smoke. He may say, oh, you ask me how I feel about my own psychology? Well, this is what I feel. I wish I didn't have the desire to smoke. I wish my desire not to smoke were stronger. I wish I didn't have the desire to smoke. The desire to smoke is killing me. If I could get rid of it, I'd get rid of it in a minute. Okay, that means on the upper level, the meta level, his attitude, his orientation is consistently against smoking. It's against having the desire to smoke. So on the first level, you have a real desire to smoke and a real desire to not smoke. And therefore, he's split. If you ask me what is his orientation, what's his position, he'll say, I'm suffering conflict. I'm suffering ambivalence because part of me wants to smoke and part of me doesn't. When you go up to the second level, there's no opposition, there's no conflict, there's no ambivalence. He's uniformly against smoking on the top level. So this gives a kind of superiority to not smoking. Let's move one. But it still doesn't solve the problem because now he has 3 real desires, and all 3 of them are real. He has the desire to smoke, which is his problem. His desire not to smoke, which causes a conflict. And then he has a real upper level desire, a meta desire, to lose the desire to smoke, and they're all real. We still haven't explained what he could mean by saying, I really don't want to smoke. To answer that question, Frankfurt and or my extension answer, you've got to understand that the meta desire is more real than the lower desires. It's more real. It's not that the desire to smoke isn't real, but it's not as real as the one on the next level. Now, why would that be? After all, they're all 3 desires, part of the person's personality. And the answer is, ask where the desire comes from. On the first level, people find themselves attracted to certain things or desiring certain things, like the desire to win at chess, or a desire to be the best basketball player in the class, or the desire to learn French. These are just things that people desire to do. Often you find yourself with those desires. After your first taste of ice cream, that desire will be with you for the rest of your life. Vanilla. That's a joke. On the second level, where you're thinking about your personality, you're thinking about your motivations, and you're evaluating them, and then you're deciding, this one I wish I didn't have. That's not just a sort of, oh, that's awful. Usually, that's a result of a judgment that this part of my personality is hurting me. It's costing me. Its overall effect on my life is negative. The desires on the second level are often, maybe even usually, the result of reflection on the large picture of one's life and evaluating what's more and less important, setting priorities, talking about one's ultimate goals, and seeing how the elements of one's psychology on the first level play a role in that larger picture. You don't just find yourself with the desire to lose the desire to smoke. What you find is a whole literature on the health damage that smoking does. And you know that you have a desire to do certain things in your lifetime, in particular, to live healthily as long as possible. And this desire on the first level to smoke is getting in the way of all that. Well, there's something more real about judgments that are based on your values and your goals and your priorities and your worldview than there is about desires that simply you find yourself having. There's a qualitative difference between them. And I think the qualitative difference is based on the following idea, and then I'm going to take the sentence we started with, I really don't want to smoke, and now finally explain it. I'll finally explain it by shifting it a little bit. Think of yourself, the totality of your whole psychology, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your good habits, your bad habits, your impulses, your priorities. Think of the whole package. Now think of who you are. Are you equally identified with all of that? Or might it not be that a certain subset you say, that's really me, that's who I am. And then the other things are things that are attached to me, like when a person says, I have a bad habit. It doesn't often say, I am a bad habit. It says, I have a bad habit. So like having a suit of clothes or having a car. Is that who I am? Something that's associated with me. But it doesn't reflect who I am. Like a person who has a tic, who has, what's the name of that? Tourette syndrome. And it's just, from time to time, sand shakes. That's just something that happens. He doesn't even do it. It just happens to him from time to time. That's hardly part of his identity. It's just something that happens. A person thinks of himself as making decisions and having commitments and having values, goals, making judgments, investigating, coming to conclusions. And then there's an itch. There's an itch. There's an itch on a par with your goals and values and commitments and priorities. No, an itch is something that happens to you. It's not you, it's something that happens to you. So when you take the psychology, the total of all of what's going on in a person's psychological life, when you ask, who are you? Not all those things are included in his identity. He's only a subset. Now the question is where to draw the line. How to draw the circle around that part that is me to exclude the other parts of the psychology that are associated with me but aren't really who I am. And I think that a step in that direction is what we said already, that like on the second level for Frankfurt, where you're talking about goals and priorities and values and hopes and dreams and so forth and so on, and you compare that with a craving for a cigarette. I just have to have a cigarette. That's not expressive of your goals and values and priorities and hopes and dreams. That's just, I got to do that. So maybe what makes the meta-desire superior is because I really want not to smoke. I, the real I, the really doesn't go on the wanting not to smoke, the really goes on the I. The real I, my real identity, doesn't want to smoke. And the wanting to smoke is on the lower level, which expresses just my psychological baggage, the stuff that they carry around with me, but not who I am. And now we could explain, again, I don't think Frankfurt goes all this way, but this is the way I would like to articulate it. We can go back to the original statement, I really don't want to smoke. What I suggest is, he means is, if you look at the real I is against smoking, period. There's nothing in the real I in favor of smoking at all. And the desire to smoke is something which is associated with me, and I have to deal with it because it's part of what's my psychological baggage, but it isn't really who I am. It's not who I am, not what I am. It's just something that I do because of certain things which are attached to me. In our way of looking things, when you understand that a human being is a soul and a body, many of the first level desires come from the body. How to articulate what the body is and what the body does and what its status is a long, complicated story. But certainly something like desire to smoke, or the desire for pleasure, or desire even to win at chess, often it comes from the lower parts of the personality, which are associated with the body, and they aren't where the real I lives. So now, when the person says, I really don't want to smoke, but I can't help it, what he means is that the real I, on the second level, with all of the really human trappings, is against smoking, and then there's something attached to him which won't let that real I control his actions. And that's the sense in which he lack inner freedom, because his essential identity can't do what it wants to do. Its desires don't get fulfilled. And the reason is because there's some other thing within him, desires, which are stopping him from having the desires of the I really fulfilled. This would be a way of describing this lack of inner freedom, where inner freedom would be the ability of the upper level, the essential I, the meta level, being able to control the actions of the person. Let's stop here and ask other questions or discussion about this. You have a question?
Yeah, Rabbi. First question is, you said there is like upper desire, but it's like just resolving the inner conflict. I don't want to smoke rationally, but I want to smoke subconsciously. So where is the meta desire? Because my desire wish not to smoke, it just could be the expression of my rational desire. Like, okay, I wish my rational side would win, but like, who said there is like a certain level, meta level of, why don't we say there are just only two levels that contradict each other? How did we get to third level?
I didn't have a third level.
Meta level, you called it.
That's the second level. I only have two levels.
Only rational and rational?
No. Let's see if I can give you maybe an example that may be more. Let's take a person who's addicted to alcohol. He says, I enjoy the drink, but I don't enjoy the hangover. The drink gives me pleasure, and the hangover gives me pain. So, I want the pleasure of the drink, and I want not to have the pain of the hangover. Those are two desires on the same level. They're just types of experience, types of feelings that I want and don't want. And they contradict one another, because if he's going to drink, he's going to have a hangover. And he knows that. So he's divided, he's at war with himself, with two desires on the very same level. They are about drinking and hangovers. Okay? Neither of those is about his psychology. It's not about who he is, and what his psychology is, and what desires he has, what desires he shouldn't have. The one is a desire to drink, the other is a desire not to have hangovers. That's not on the meta level. The meta level is where the desire is about my psychology. I have these and these desires, fears, hopes, and so forth and so on. They're part of my psychology. And he says, I wish I didn't have this desire. Now he's talking about his desires. He's not talking about drinking. He's not talking about hangovers. He's not talking about pleasure. He's not talking about pain. He's talking about what kind of desires he should have and what desires he doesn't want to have. So that's definitely a different level. Just artificially, it's a different level. But even if you didn't read any significance into it, there's nothing wrong with the definition. Some desires are about having, doing, and being, and some desires are about what psychology you have. Now the question is, why would you say that? Let me say a little bit more, which I didn't say before, but maybe that'll help. A desire to drink and a desire not to have hangovers are completely opposed desires. You cannot satisfy both of them. Okay. Now imagine you have the desire to drink, now go up the level, and a desire not to want drinking anymore. Not to want it. Not to have the desire of drinking anymore. Well, there's a tension there, obviously, but there's not an absolute contradiction, and I'll show you. Let's imagine an alcoholic who goes to once a week group therapy sessions, and he pays for it. And let's say it's helping, though it hasn't solved his problem yet. He comes to the therapy session, and the therapist says, yeah, what was your experience this week, and how do you feel, and so forth and so on. And he says, listen, I did, but I felt terrible, but I felt better, and then I recovered on Wednesday. And as he's talking to the therapist in the group therapy session, he takes out a bottle and takes a drink. Both desires are operating simultaneously. The desire to drink is operating because he takes the drink. And the desire to stop having the desire to drink is also operating. That's why he's at the group therapy session. So there isn't an absolute contradiction between them. There's a tension in that for one of the desires to be completely fulfilled, the other one would have to disappear. But it's not like desiring to drink and desiring not to have a hangover. Those can't both be true at all, ever, under any condition, because the one causes the other. So that shows you there's a difference between conflict on the same level versus conflict from level to level. They don't have the same structure. They don't have the same logic. Okay? So then the challenge is, okay, they're all real. When you start, at this point, there's the desire to smoke, there's the desire to drink, and desire not to have a hangover, and on the meta level, desire not to have the desire to drink. They're all real. Still haven't justified saying, I really don't want to drink. Because they're all real. And the answer to that is, well, they're all real, but not all equally real. And they don't apply equally to the I. The drinker will say, I have a drinking problem. He won't say, I am a drinking problem. I have a problem. Again, it's like having a rash on your arm, or it's like having an automobile. He has a problem. And the I is overwhelmed by the problem. Because the I is uniformly against drinking. There's no conflict on the meta level. On the meta level, you have only opposition to drinking, and yet he's drinking. So that's where his conflict lies. And the reason why I say I really don't want to drink is correct is because the real I, which is expressing itself on the meta level, is very different from that about him, which is expressing itself on the first level. In the context of our picture of a human being with a soul and the body, the second level will be expressive of the soul, and the first level will be expressive of the body. And there you can now make a clear distinction. The I, in a certain sense with qualifications, the I is the soul, and the body is an attached element. For the Rambam, this is certainly true. For those of us who have the Kabbalistic tradition, that some more has to be said. But that's roughly the idea. And then I want to explain, I really don't want to smoke, I really don't want to drink, as the real I, my real identity, is uniformly against drinking. It's uniformly against smoking. And then that turns out to be reasonably clear and reasonably true. So we finally made sense out of what this guy's saying when he says it. Now, all of that was to give you a picture of what it means not to have inner freedom. What would inner freedom be? Inner freedom would be where the first level desires are all in tune with the second level desires. The second level desires, which come from your judgments and values and priorities and values, all of that. If your first level desires were in tune, you would feel like you were in tune the whole time. When you let your first level desires operate, your second level would look down and say, yeah, good, right, that's really the right thing. So, for example, we're studying Torah, and we try to be dedicated to it, and we struggle with certain kinds of temptations for interruptions of various kinds. Now, let's imagine the Gaon of Vilna. Is he greater than we are because he faced our temptations? But he's tougher than we are, stronger than we are. He's been studying for 3 hours straight. How about going and getting a Coke? Yeah, Coke. But no, I can't do that. What are you talking about? It's God's Torah. No, I'm not going to get the Coke. Pull yourself together! We're not going to get the Coke. No, that's not a good picture of the Gaon of Vilna. You offer him a Coke after 6 hours study. You say, you're crazy? I'm studying. What do you mean? There's nothing greater than this. Nothing more beautiful than this. Nothing more pleasurable than this. Go to get a Coke? You're nuts. 1 year, they found, the story goes, on the night of Yom Kippur, they found on the stender where he stood to daven of the Gaon of Vilna a little book. And as Talmidim sometimes do, someone decided to get a look at the book. And the title of the book was Time Wasted per Year. And the entry for that year was 5 minutes. You're not going to tempt the Gaon of Vilna with an offer of Coke, which is going to interrupt his learning. Could you tempt him? Oh, yes, you could. You could, and he was tested. An angel came to him and said, I'll give you Torah. I'll inject Torah into your brain. You'll have much more Torah. And he answered, no, because Torah that I didn't work to get for myself isn't what I'm here to get. He had to give up Torah. That was a Yetzer Hara. That was something which could appeal to him, to his wish. So when he's learning and he's not going for the Coke, the first level is operating on its own, and the second level is saying, you're wonderful. That's exactly right. Of course not. Coke, don't be stupid. Do the thing that the Gaon of Vilna is famous for saying, that every word of Torah is a separate mitzvah. Every word is a separate mitzvah. How many words are going to cost you to get the Coke? 132? You lost 132 mitzvahs. That's not in his. So there's a person where, at least on that level, his first level is in sync with his second level, and there he's not. It's not opposed and not constricted by the first level, and that's where the second level has inner freedom. That's the first thing I want to tell you. You have another question? Yeah.
Yeah. How do we know the story about Vilna Gaon?
Okay, I don't know. One of his students is maybe the one who did it handed it down. But there's a famous story about the Chafetz Chaim. He was called as a character witness to a trial, and the attorney was introducing him to the judge, and he told him some of the stories about the Chafetz Chaim. He was standing there, and the judge says, "Do you believe all those stories?" And the attorney said, "Well, Your Honor, they don't tell stories like that about you and me." So maybe there's exaggeration there, and maybe someone's confused, but still, he's a special person. Yeah, you can trust that. So the same thing's true with the Gaon of Vilna. They don't tell stories. And if you ever get a chance to study some of what he's written, I've mentioned a couple of times here because people don't appreciate it, especially people with a certain type of orientation, that he was a gigantic Kabbalist. Many say he was the greatest Kabbalist of his era. So he knew all over and cared about many, many different types of Jewish subjects and wrote about them. And he wrote I have a son in Lakewood who teaches the writings of the Gaon of Vilna on Kabbalistic subjects. So he was a gigantic, unique personality. scholar, tzaddik. You know. By the way, his official title was a Chassid Vilna, the Chassid from Vilna. You can take that as you like, however you want to touch it. Okay, now, I want to apply this to the idea of change. When a person changes, I think the two levels make a big difference in terms of how you pursue change and how you perceive change, how you experience change. Let's suppose that the smoker or the alcoholic succeed in overcoming the addiction. How will they describe the success? How will they describe the difference between before and after? I think the description that they will use is, I had a gigantic problem. This problem was costing me a lot. And now I've been able to overcome it, and I'm on a much more solid footing, and I'm able to do the things that I really wanted to do. I think that's reasonable vocabulary. Now, let's imagine something else. Let's imagine a person grows up in a family and in a society where something is of very great value. And then gets into his 20s, and he learns a bit more about the world and other people and other cities, societies, cultures who have a different view on the world. And he thinks, wow, do I really want to be like that? And he comes to the conclusion that maybe not. Maybe the way I was brought up and the way my values work isn't the best way a person can be. And he decides to shift his basic values. I'll give you an example. This isn't too far-fetched. He grows up in a society where competition is very valuable, winning at competition. That's what gets you praise. That's what gets you offers for valuable positions. That's what gets you friendship and respect. And he's good at it. He's good at it, and he wins. He wins a lot. And he's, in the top 5 percentile of his age population. He's doing very well. And he's happy. He's happy and satisfied. And then he meets people who prize cooperation and who prize identifying with the whole of the community, not just with a select few. And he has experiences which expose him to the sufferings of less fortunate people, which move him. And he begins to think, wow, maybe just winning isn't all of life. And maybe it's not as important as other things in life. And slowly, gradually, he changes his orientation. And then he feels, oh, man, but when it gets started, I'm in there for the juggler, I'm not taking no for an answer. So he says, well, I've got to change. I can't be like that anymore. And he trains himself to be less aggressive and less competitive to the point where, let's say after a 10-year struggle, he manages to change his basic orientation, his basic priorities, his basic perception, and his reactions. How will he describe now the difference between what he was and what he is now? I think he might say, I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm a new person. And that's because something on the meta level changed. His values, his priorities, his goals, his dreams, his visions. That's what's changed. When that changes, then you're a new person. Whereas when things on the first level change, like an addiction, you've conquered a problem. But it's the same you that suffered the problem that has now conquered the problem. The same you that before was constricted by the problem, held back from doing what it decided was important to do, that very same self now can do what it has decided what it's important to do. That's not a change in your identity, that's a change in the associated psychology. I'm saying this because when a person decides to adopt a religious lifestyle, changes have to take place. And each human being is a multiply complex being and has different aspects, and the different aspects respond to the change in different ways. Some aspects change more easily, and some aspects change with more difficulty, and it varies from person to person. There's no general rule here as to which is going to be easy and which is going to be difficult. And the deeper elements often are the hardest ones to change, and they take the longest amount of time. So, how much does it take to put on one of these? That's why we don't want people to do it, because it's easy and it distracts you from the real changes, which are inner changes. Your way of evaluating, your way of if you see somebody who isn't doing as well as you, there's part of you say, well, he's just lazy. I work hard, and I succeed. If he worked hard, he would also succeed. So he's just lazy. That might be wrong. Might be wrong. Might be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put him in a situation where he, with all the energy and strength and resolve in the world, he can't do any better. And you have to change your orientation to think that way. Because the first way serves your competitive nature. I'm better than he is. That's why I win. The better ones win. And it's not always true. So the shift to adopting a religious lifestyle is not just your behavior, your speech, priorities in action. It's also inner. It's a question of how you look at the world and how you experience the world. Those things change much more slowly, and then, indeed, when those things change, you are becoming a different person. I'll give you one illustration of what I mean. Rav Dessler has many writings, and all of them are very instructive. One that I've invested a lot of time in is his writings on nature and miracle, and bitochen v'ishtadlus, which means trust in God versus the endeavor of taking care of your own life. And here is a principle that he uses in this whole discussion. Let's take the difference between miracle and nature. So there is a position, I think it's, problem here is there's a disagreement about whether or not there's a disagreement. It's a Jewish subject. I don't think there is any serious disagreement. I think everyone agrees, but people will disagree with me. I think that everyone agrees that divine will underlies everything that happens. It underlies even human free choice, though it doesn't dictate what the choice will be. And it underlies everything else that happens. Now, if you had that picture, then you would be able to make a statement like with Chanina ben Dosa. The famous story in the Gemara, Chanina ben Dosa's daughter prepared the lamps for Shabbos, and she lit them, and then she realized, to her horror, that instead of putting oil in the receptacle where the wick was, she put in vinegar. She used the wrong container. And she cried out to her father, I put in vinegar, I didn't put in oil. And Chanina said to her, he who commanded the oil to burn will command the vinegar to burn. What does that mean? Suppose you're there and you see, oh my gosh, it's vinegar. Phew, I can smell it. It's not oil. The house is going to be dark. Once you've lit the lamps, that's Shabbos already. Nothing else you can do. And Rabbi says, don't worry, it'll be light anyway. The vinegar will burn. Vinegar's going to burn? That's a miracle. Let's see. Let's watch. Really? Look at that. The vinegar is... I'm going to tell my children, my grandchildren, I'll put it up on my Facebook page. No, we don't have Facebook. That would be enormously exciting. Be a once-in-a-lifetime event. Chanina Dosa said, no. The vinegar burning is no more remarkable, no more impressive than the oil burning. Because he who commands the oil to burn, oil doesn't burn because it's oil, because there's a certain chemical structure, because oxygen is available for oxidation. That's not why it burns. It burns because the Kadosh Baruch Hu makes it burn. And he'll make the vinegar burn. Rabbi Chanina also sees the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the oil burning just as much as he sees it in the vinegar burning. We don't see that. Oil is oil. Everybody's oil burns. Even in China it burns. But vinegar burns? Wow! So, if you ask me for my official philosophy, who makes the world run? God. And if oil burns, why does it burn? Because God wants it to. And if vinegar burns, why would that happen? Because God wants it to. I know the right answers to the questions, but I don't experience it that way. I experience the miracle as a gigantic revelation. And I experience the natural event as something which just happens all the time. It's not worthy of remark. Yeshivat Ohr Somayach experienced them equally. That's a very different experience of the world. Says Rav Dessler, the purpose of the practice of trusting God, which has 4 different categories of application, and within one category there are 2 applications, a very complicated system that he has. The purpose of it is to become as like Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa as possible, to change the way you experience the world. This would mean everything. Getting on a bus, make a telephone call, writing words on a piece of paper, all of it. That would be a real, deep, fundamental change in a person's identity. He wouldn't be the same person anymore if he experienced the world that way. That's at the deepest level of who the person is. Now let me give you a simpler example of this, which we, in our state of being, could work on. The Chazon Ish wrote that trusting God means, among other things, it means that you could never predict with certainty what's going to happen. Because since God is all-powerful, he could change anything at any moment. So to say, well, A happened, so B has to happen, B must happen, B is necessitated to happen, is to deny God's being all-powerful. Because if he's all-powerful, it doesn't have to happen. So the Gemara's example is, the non-Jew has the sword to the neck of the Jew, and he's already started to cut, and the blood of the Jew is running down the sword of the sword of the non-Jew, and it says, don't give up hope of being saved. Because even at that moment, Kadosh Baruch Hu can save you. So, if you're looking at your picture of the future, everybody has a picture of the future. That's how you orient yourself what to do. Is it going to rain this afternoon? Will there be trains in an hour? Etc. You have your picture. You have compartments, economy and health and personal relationships and so on. You have to have one little packet, one little portion of the picture with a question mark in it. Because you have a question mark in it, that means that you don't know what's going to happen. Something totally unexpected could happen. Then, like I said, in the last hour, you'll be prepared when something happens that you didn't expect. Because if you don't expect the unexpected, when the unexpected happens, you won't even see it. You won't even perceive it. So this is something that you could work on. How certain am I of what's going to happen? And try to make yourself less certain. Try to imagine other possibilities and think, nothing's stopping God from realizing those opportunities. So that being the case, you put God into your picture of the future by lessening your certainty of what the future is going to hold. And that's, I would say, a minor change in your identity. You react differently, and your vision your scope of vision is much wider, and you're looking for things which might be unexpected. So the Torah requires ultimately a transformation of the identity of the person, and people do it to greater or lesser extent, and you do it in different aspects of your identity. Not everybody's the same. It's a very, very varied program, and for different individuals. No one size fits all approach to it. But all of this is on a much different level from those parts of psychology which are only associated with you. They're not part of who you are. Yeah.
The question is saying like the right moment. You said it is not the part of who you are, but in case of even physical disabilities, or in case of habits that do impact who you are, at least perception, like Stephen Hawking, we could not say he was a physicist, just he was trapped in the body. No, like the fact that he was trapped in the body somehow contributed to him, like to his great intellectual abilities, or at least impacted the way he saw the world from his point of view. Like the same way, like previous alcoholic who had previous alcoholic experience had has a bit different view on alcohol forever. Even so, he even removed it there, but he always had this different attribute towards alcohol than any other people could ever relate to. I mean, like what I'm saying is like the table. It's like with physical items comparing, like whatever is happening. Even so, it was not a result of whatever like they believe, but like if we cut the part of it, even if we put it together, there is always going to be a mark, and it's always going to be a part of what the table is.
Well, I don't think what I said violates that. Let me see if I can say in different words what I think you're saying. That there's effects going from one level to the other. I think that's right. For example, I said that one of the things that could happen to a person who's brought up competitive is to observe the pain of people who get hurt from competition, and that could cause him to think again about his commitment to the value of winning a competition. Observing the pain is on the first level, it's not on the second level. It's just, I see him suffering and that hurts me, right? So that's on the first, so I think that's right, that what happens on one level can have an effect on the other level. That doesn't mean they're not different levels. When A causes B, A is the cause and B is the effect. They're not the same, they're not identical, and causation goes from one level to another. When I realize that this person is trying to commit murder and he should be stopped, and I'm close enough to hit him, then my fist hits him. That's on the first level. That's punching him, right? So the second level can cause effects on the first level, and events on the first level can cause effects on the second level. I think that's quite right. That doesn't mean there aren't two levels.
No, I'm just saying like they're essentially a part of one another. Like either way, if you say, for example, there is.
Look, take for example the alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
His experience of alcoholism will be with him for the rest of his life. Yeah. But let's suppose he starts off life, like tragically many Americans do today, with the attitude, I'm a victim. And then he graduates to the point where he says, no, I'm an active person. I have a will. I have the ability to create, and I can take responsibility for myself and cure myself, rather than protesting against the government and protesting against medicine and protesting against big pharma and then so forth and so on. No, I could actually do something to help myself. So then the experience of alcoholism has a very different relationship to his I, because his I integrates it in a different way. So the fact that he has the experience of alcoholism, which he will have for the rest of his life, having had it at least he'll have for the rest of his life, but that doesn't dictate what the I is going to, how the I is going to be oriented to that experience. That's what these changes in the I do. They change the way you relate to all of those things on that level. So I don't think that there's anything there that contradicts what I'm trying to say. I can hear it anyway. Maybe.
For example, for people that had emotional, like PTSD, like soldiers.
As what?
PTSD,
Yes.
Is there a way for them to overcome such shows?
Of course.
How could you look at the difference?
Of course. There are survivors from the Holocaust. If anybody should suffer that, they should suffer it. And some of them were gigantically creative and inspirational and building and built whole communities after the Holocaust. Of course they can be overcome. Or you can be the kind of person who won't suffer it in the first place because you're strong enough to carry yourself through it. I'll tell you one thing, then I have to quit. One of the things that causes PTSD and other types of events like that is the extent to which you are prepared or not prepared for the stress. Viktor Frankl, who was in one of the work camps, he was a psychiatrist then already, and then he created logotherapy. He reports he was working, And apparently he wasn't working fast enough for the Nazi guard, the SS guard. So the SS guard picked up a club of earth and threw it at him. And he said, that's the way you would attract the attention of an animal. I'm a psychiatrist. If I were back in Vienna, he could have been a patient of mine. Now he's throwing a clod of earth at me as if I'm an animal. So let me give you my commentary on that. I have the highest honors that the secular society could offer. Psychiatrist, a psychologist plus an MD. Mama's not top of the world. I was making more money than anybody could make, right? And he's treating me as an animal. That's like totally disorienting. Totally. How do you put that together? But let me tell you something. Jews who were faithful to the tradition expect that. They expect that. They defend themselves against it, and they will fight to prevent it. But if it happens, it doesn't disorient them. It doesn't set them wondering who I am and what I'm doing and where I am, because we have thousands of years of experience and we have a consistent literature which tells us this is the kind of way that the non-Jewish world will treat the Jew if it suits them. So then, if you're prepared for it, it doesn't undermine you in the same way. Frankel survived it, obviously, and because of his own strength. But pointing out how the extent to which you're prepared for it will change drastically the extent to which it has an effect on you. Okay.